Welcome to the deep dive. The news this week, it's really been dominated by this pretty big development with TikTok.
Yeah, that Irish fine.
Exactly. May 2nd, 2025, the Irish Data Protection Commission, the DPC, they slapped TikTok with this massive 530 million fine.
Which is what, around 600 million US dollars? Huge amount.
Right, according to NHK World Japan News. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it, about what's actually going on with this app everyone uses.
It certainly does. And, this fine's not really out of the blue, is it?
No, not at all.
It's just the latest thing in this ongoing story of global scrutiny around TikTok.
Totally. It feels like we've been hearing about potential bans, restrictions for ages now.
Yeah.
Like that Dear ban in the U.S., the one written into law.
Right, that was meant for January this year. But I think it got delayed.
It did. And then you've got India's ban way back in 2020. If you look around, you see this pattern, this concern in lots of different countries.
Yeah, there's a whole list of places are restricting it.
So what's really at the heart of all this? Why are governments getting so serious? That's what we want to, dig into today.
Yeah, our goal is to get past the headlines a bit, really try and understand the core issues here. We'll look at the Irish ruling, sure, but also how the app itself works and these data security questions that just keep popping up.
Right. So some key questions for you listening. First, what exactly did TikTok do wrong, according to the EU? They mentioned data transfers, transparency issues. Let's unpack that. Then, how does TikTok's whole model, especially that Addictive for You page and its algorithm, how does that play into these data worries?
That's crucial. And we can't ignore the big one, the data security concerns, especially the link to China, potential access by authorities there.
Yeah, the 2017 National Intelligence Law keeps coming up. We need to touch on that, what the DPC report said too.
And beyond just governments, how might companies like TikTok use all this data they collect? Is it just ads or more?
Good question. And finally, the practical bit. For you, as someone online maybe using TikTok, what can you actually do to protect your privacy better? We've got some tips.
Yeah, but not the practical stuff. Our aim is really just to give you the essential info without getting lost in super technical jargon.
Okay, sounds good. Let's start with that EU fine then, the Irish DPC. What did they actually find? What were the violations?
Okay, so the DPC's decision, it wasn't just a vague feeling of unease. They specifically found GDPR violations. That's the EU's big data protection law.
Right.
And the violations were about transferring personal data of users in the European Economic Area, the EEA, to China, and also about how clear or maybe unclear TikTok was about these transfers.
So hang on, it wasn't just that they were sending data to China, but how they did it and what they told people about it.
Precisely. The DPC basically said TikTok didn't adequately make sure that when EEA user data could potentially be seen by staff in China, that data still had the same level of protection it gets inside the EU. Under GDPR, if you're sending data outside the EU, you need really strong safeguards. You have to make sure it's still protected to an equivalent standard.
Okay, so the DPC felt TikTok hadn't properly checked if the data, once in China, would have the same legal protections as in Europe.
That's the core of it. They specifically mentioned some Chinese laws, like the anti-terrorism law and that national intelligence law we mentioned earlier.
Right.
And they noted that TikTok's own internal assessment admitted these laws were significantly different from EU data protection standards. The worry is, under those laws, Chinese authorities could potentially demand access to EEA users' data.
And TikTok hadn't done enough to counter that risk.
That was the DPC's conclusion. And what's really interesting here is how this ruling might set a benchmark for other companies transferring data to countries with different legal systems.
Okay, so we get the potential government access concern. Was there anything else the DPC flagged?
Yes, actually, this is quite important. Initially, TikTok had told the DPC that European user data wasn't stored on servers in China. But then, just in April 2025, TikTok apparently told them, actually, we found an issue back in February, where a limited amount of this data had been stored on Chinese servers.
Whoa. So they'd said one thing, but the reality was different.
Exactly. They said it contradicted their earlier statements. Now, TikTok says that data's been deleted since, but you can imagine the DPC is taking this discrepancy very seriously. They're even thinking about more regulatory action because of it.
Wow. So not just the legal framework risk, but also questions about whether TikTok was upfront about where the data actually was. And the consequences are more than just the money, right?
Oh, absolutely. That 530 million fine is huge, but the DPC also ordered TikTok to get its data processing fully compliant with GDPR within 6 months.
6 months. That's not long.
Not at all. And here's the kicker. They also ordered TikTok to suspend any transfers of EEA user data to China if they don't meet that deadline.
Suspend transfers entirely. That could be massive for their operations.
It really could. So this isn't just a fine, it's a serious directive. And this EU ruling, it really highlights these global worries we've seen elsewhere, right? Like the US situation, India's ban. What are the common threads there?
Yeah. What keeps coming up as the main reasons for these actions?
Well, it usually boils down to a few key themes, and national security concerns are almost always front and center.
Right.
Governments worry that because TikTok's owned by a Chinese company, ByteDance, and because of those Chinese intelligence laws, the company could be forced to share sensitive user data with Beijing.
For spying or maybe influence campaigns.
Exactly. Those are the stated fears.
And I guess it all comes back to just how much data these platforms actually collect on us.
Precisely. TikTok gathers a ton of information, your basic profile stuff, sure, but also device info, location data if you allow it, and really detailed behavioral data.
Like what?
Basically everything you do in the app. What videos you watch, how long you watch them, what you like, share, comment on, even the stuff you skip past really quickly. Some sources even raise concerns about potential access to your phone's clipboard. You know, what you copy and paste and payment info if you buy things through the app.
And all that intense data collection, that's basically the fuel for the For You page, isn't it? That's how it knows what to show you next.
Exactly right. TikTok's algorithm is designed purely to keep you engaged, keep you scrolling. It tracks every single tap, pause, like share, skip.
Every little interaction.
Yep. And it uses that data in real time to build this super personalized feed it thinks you won't be able to put down. It's what makes the app so sticky.
It's fascinating, really, how it learns from your subtle cues, not just what you explicitly say you like.
But that constant tracking means they're building this incredibly detailed picture of each user. Who does TikTok actually share all that information with?
Well, according to their privacy policy, they share data with quite a few different groups.
Who?
Their parent company, ByteDance obviously, advertising and marketing partners, service providers who help run the app, payment processors, that kind of thing.
Law enforcement and government agencies, but only when they're legally required to, and also potentially third-party trackers and data brokers.
Data brokers. So once it's shared with advertisers, it could end up anywhere.
Well, it becomes much harder to track where it goes and how it might be used or shared further down the line. That's definitely a concern.
And that link to ByteDance in China, that's the real sticking point for governments, isn't it? Especially with that 2017 national intelligence law.
That law is absolutely central to the worries. It basically says Chinese companies have to cooperate with state intelligence work if asked.
Even if the data is about users outside China.
Well, TikTok maintains strongly that it doesn't share data with the Chinese government and wouldn't comply with such requests for non-Chinese user data. They have data centers outside China, Project Texas in the US, Project Clover in Europe, attempts to isolate data.
But the law still exists.
Exactly. The legal obligation is there on paper, which creates this inherent worry. And it doesn't help that there have been those past reports, right, about ByteDance employees improperly accessing U.S. user data, including journalists.
I remember that. That definitely didn't help build trust.
Not at all. Just fuels those fears.
Okay, so potential government access is a big one. But apart from that, how else could user data be misused by a company like TikTok? We all know about targeted ads, but what else?
Targeted advertising is definitely the main commercial use, no doubt. These rich profiles they build allow advertisers to target very specific groups with incredible precision.
Based on age, location, interests.
Oh, yeah, and incredibly specific interests based on exactly what content you watch. But the potential for misuse goes beyond just showing you ads you might click on.
How so?
Just the sheer amount and detail of this data, once it's shared with various third parties, who knows what it could potentially be used for down the road? Things we maybe haven't even thought of yet.
And what about the algorithm itself? Could that be misused?
That's another layer of concern, absolutely. The algorithm is designed to maximize engagement, right, and keep your eyeballs glued.
Yeah.
But theoretically, it could be tweaked to amplify certain messages or suppress others, maybe for political reasons, maybe commercial ones.
Like spreading propaganda or disinformation.
That's the fear raised by some critics. Now, look, that's a potential risk with any powerful social media algorithm, but the fact that TikTok's parent company is subject to Chinese law adds that extra dimension of concern for some governments.
Okay, this all sounds pretty concerning for the average person just trying to watch some funny videos. So as someone using TikTok or just, living online, what can we actually do? Are there concrete steps to protect our privacy?
Yes, definitely. You're not powerless here. There are several practical things you can do, and lots of resources outline these.
Like what? Where should we start?
First, go into the TikTok app itself. Dive into your privacy settings, really take a look. Maybe make your account private if you want more control over who sees your stuff. Manage who can comment, who can duet with you, who can send you direct messages. Limit it down. And look for the option to disable personalized ads. That should limit how much your behavior is tracked for ad targeting.
What about outside the app, like on our phones?
Good point. Check your phone's main settings menu. Go to app permissions. See what permissions you've actually given TikTok.
Camera, microphone, location.
Exactly. Contacts, maybe calendar. Ask yourself, does it really need access to all of that? You can often restrict access to only while using the app, or just turn permissions off entirely if they seem excessive.
Like precise location, probably don't need that on all the time.
Generally, no. Turning off precise location for TikTok is a pretty standard privacy tip.
Yeah.
And be really careful about any app asking for clipboard access.
Okay, settings in the app, permissions on the phone, anything else, sort of good digital habits.
Yeah, basic security hygiene helps. Enable two-factor authentication or 2FA on your TikTok account. That adds another security layer if someone tries to log in.
Definitely do that for important accounts.
Absolutely. And be super wary of third-party apps or websites promising like extra TikTok features or see who viewed your profile. Those are often just scams to steal your login details or data.
Yeah. Avoid those.
And just generally think before you post. Don't overshare sensitive personal stuff. Maybe clear out your watch and search history in TikTok now and then. And if you're a parent, use TikTok's parental controls, but also just talk to your kids regularly about being safe and private online.
That's all really solid, practical advice. Stuff people can actually do.
Right.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. Our deep dive today, it really showed that this huge EU fine isn't just some vague TikTok is bad thing.
No, it's very specific.
It's about specific GDPR violations transferring European user data to China without the right safeguards and not being transparent about it. And that potential suspension of data transfers in 6 months. That's a big deal.
It really is. And we've seen how TikTok's whole model, that amazing algorithm, it needs massive amounts of data to work. It builds these incredibly detailed profiles. Great for ads, sure, but it creates inherent privacy risks.
And the core security worry, especially for governments, comes back to that potential for the Chinese government to access data because of Chinese law and ByteDance's location.
That's a recurring theme.
Yeah.
And it's vital to remember this data isn't just used for ads. It gets shared. And there are those other maybe less obvious risks like algorithmic manipulation.
But importantly, as you said, we're not powerless. You, the listener, can take steps. Managing privacy settings, checking app permissions, using 2FA, just being mindful, these things actually make a difference.
They really do. It's about taking back some control.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, here's maybe a final thought for you to chew on.
Yeah.
We focus a lot on TikTok, and for good reason given the news. But lots of platforms, including big U.S. ones, collect enormous amounts of data. Right?
Oh, absolutely. The entire digital ad ecosystem runs on it.
So how should we think about this bigger picture as individuals, as societies? Should we be focusing so much on individual apps, or do we need a more fundamental look at data privacy rules everywhere? Do we need broader regulations, maybe even international ones, that apply across the board, not just based on where a company's headquartered?
That's a really big question. How do we balance innovation, user experience, national security, and fundamental privacy rights in this global digital world?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.